Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Calley, CEO of the Small Business Association Michigan.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Operations. Thanks for tuning in today. I do want to welcome one of our new members, owner Lynn McCain, and her business Prepared to Grow. Thanks for joining. So, Brian, it's a really big week here at SBAM. You want to fill people in on what we have going on?
Yeah, this is the week when we do the Michigan Celebrate Small Business 2-day event, and it starts out with a summit. So it's an opportunity for people who own businesses to work on the business. So you're working in your business all the time. It's a time to really to focus on growing your internal capacity, spending time with other business owners, learning and growing and connecting with other business owners. So that's the summit. And then we do a nice reception that's tomorrow, and then a nice reception that evening. And then the next day, we start out with a Capitol experience. We'll be at the Capitol with um, a lot of this is what going to be one of our more popular events. I think we're kind of over capacity there, but we're just going to make it work anyway. Yeah, don't tell anybody that running the fire codes there. But like but this is a really good opportunity to learn how the system works. So this our Capital Day isn't like here's SBM's issues and adopt these positions on bills and things like that. It's more about the process. How does the process work? And what we hope is to inspire people to elevate their own voice and get involved in creating a better environment for business owners just by understanding how that process works. It's a great bipartisan effort. We've got folks from both sides of the aisle on very, very key positions that will be spending time with business owners and also have an opportunity to get out on the House floor as well, which is a great treat. The and then there's the red carpet event at the Breslin Center. So Michigan Celebrate Small Business has got a more than 20-year history, and over those 20 years, we've recognized the 50 companies to watch every year, and we do a big gala, like a literal red carpet event at the Breslin Center, take over that whole facility. And it's a lot of fun. We also during this time release the entrepreneurship scorecard report. That will be tomorrow. We will release that during the summit. And we'll cover that next week on the briefing, but also if you happen to be at the summit, you'll see some of the highlights and some of the lowlights from the entrepreneurship scorecard report. And it's very, very clear that small businesses are the main event of the Michigan economy. It's undeniable when you look at the scorecard report, but also some trends that show some constraints and growth in the future that we really need to be aware of. So lots of great information packed into just a couple days. At SBM, it's our biggest 2 days of the year.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And so hopefully we'll be seeing some of you over these two events. Stop us and say hi if we do. And if you're not able to attend this year, go ahead and follow Michigan Celebrates Small Business on social media. You'll get to see some highlights of the event these next couple of days, and then you'll make sure to have all the dates for 2027 on your calendar as well. All right, so let's dive into the first story today, and this one is about Enbridge. They had a big win with the Supreme Court of the United States. How close is this project now from getting underway, and what's still
Yes.
up in the air?
Yeah, it is still, it's a marathon. These types of things, these types of big infrastructure projects are a marathon anyway, but especially when they're challenged in court. And so every single step it goes through lawsuits and then appeals to those decisions. And ultimately these are ending up very high, in this case, the Supreme Court itself. So there's a countersuit, the Enbridge countersuing the state for its efforts to essentially seize their property, the easement that they have, and and the state had claimed immunity that has gone from that to say we can't be sued, and the Supreme Court has declined to take up the appeal of the appellate court decision. And that's a win for Enbridge. So they are racking up the wins here. Most of this stuff wasn't really in question legally. It was sometimes in as unfortunately some of our members would know, sometimes lawsuits are filed for delay strategies as opposed to expecting that you're going to change an outcome. And that really does seem to be the issue here. Now, there's a couple of other things before the project moves forward. The first thing is that there is a jurisdictional lawsuit does this belong in state court or federal court? That is headed down the road of kind of a, um, a, a final jurisdiction, if you will, decision that it belongs in federal court. And it really, again, I think it's a foregone conclusion because we're talking about a treaty between two countries. States can't um, determine treaties between the United States and Canada. So, but still, there's a process, and it just literally takes years to work through it. So there's still some open questions in court on that issue, and then also the Army Corps of Engineers is very close. They've done a draft permit that's open for comment, and then that's the last. The permit from the Army Corps of Engineers is the last thing to actually move forward on the project, like break ground. And now there could be other lawsuits, could be other kind of efforts to stop or slow it down. But as a reminder, this is to remove the pipeline that goes on the bottomlands and put it into a dry tunnel in bedrock below the straits. That's that's really what this dispute ultimately is about, is whether or not to leave it where it is or to put it in a tunnel below the straits. The That kind of gets lost in this debate. Sometimes people thinking about it in terms of like, what if we didn't have a pipeline at all? There already is a pipeline, so that's not the option is not to not have a pipeline. The question is, do you want it in the water or do you want it in bedrock in a dry tunnel below the water? And so it's inching toward, and it feels like it's getting toward the end. But when I say getting toward the end, think about like at the end of a championship basketball game, and there's 1 minute to go, but that 1 minute really takes a long time because there's all the timeouts and the strategy at the end to slow things down. Same thing here. It's toward the end, could be another 2 years, but this has been going on for many, many years. And so toward the end has got a pretty long tail on it.
All right, thanks for that update. Let's talk about Michigan's unemployment rate. It held steady again this month. So, what's the latest with state job growth and the workforce?
Yeah, this is one of those areas you've heard me say before that unemployment can go up for good reasons or down for bad reasons or vice versa. It's not something where higher is better in all cases and lower is worse in all cases because labor force participation is part of this equation. So while it would kind of generally be a good signal that the state's unemployment rate has held steady for 3 or 4 months, remember it had been climbing upward and then it actually came down a little bit, and then it has stayed steady at 5% compared to the nation, which is 4.4. But keep in mind this: the nation's unemployment actually has gone up a little bit. Again, neither of these has changed a lot, but the gap between the two at 0.6% is actually smaller than it's been for a little while. But the number of jobs in the state actually has shrunk during this time. So even though unemployment stayed the same, jobs shrunk by about 9,000 in the most recent surveys, about 9,000 um, uh, fewer jobs. What that means though is that the labor force participation reduced as well. So the state's labor department had indicated that labor force had shrunk to 60.5%. Um, and that really accounts for how you can have jobs go down, but the rate doesn't go up. It's because labor force went down too. That means people dropping out of the labor force, and could be for a lot of reasons. Sometimes people who are long-term unemployed just give up. But with our demographics, it's more likely retirements that are a big part of that. People permanently exiting the labor force due to just reaching the age when they're ready to retire. So it's just one of these challenges, I think, that it's going to be with us for a while. So labor force participation had been making a bit of a comeback in Michigan, but unfortunately, we seem to be kind of reverting back, especially since the unemployment insurance benefit, the weekly benefit went up about, well, has it been a year now ago, a little over a year ago? And that does coincide with when we saw the improvement in workforce participation stop and then start to go backward.
All right, let's move on to Election Watch 2026. Emerson College published a new poll. What did it show?
All right, I'm going to share my screen because I want to share with you the these two there's two races basically. And the two races are the race for governor and the race for United States Senate. So Emerson College, which is a serious national pollster, had put out a primary poll on both. And this is I was really thankful to see this because a lot of the polling has been presumptive nominees in a general election. But those to be the nominee in a general election, you got to first win the primary. So we got these primaries coming up. So let's talk about governor first. On the left-hand side of your screen, you see the Republican primary for governor. This one is way more active than on the right-hand side of the screen. I should have switched them. Got the Republicans on the left and the Democrats on the right. But anyway, the you'll see that John James, who was kind of treated as a presumptive nominee, is neck and neck with Perry Johnson. Actually, Perry Johnson showing up a little bit higher here. Now, Perry Johnson spent over $10 million of his own money on this election, and clearly it's made a difference. So you see that is a real race. And then take a look at number three on there is Mike Cox, former Attorney General Mike Cox at 10%. And so those, and then if you kept dropping down from there, you see Eric Nesbitt and Tom Leonard, those two candidates, even though they're lower, those two at least have resources to be out there running ads and being active in a campaign. Especially Eric Nesbitt has millions of dollars that he's raised on this election. So he's starting to make a move in terms of getting his name ID up around the state. But there's a race there, and there is no presumptive nominee anymore. So before the treatment of, it looks like there's just one candidate that's way ahead. That's not the case anymore. It's going to be a real race, and it could turn into a 3 or 4 person race before it's done. Now, on the right-hand side of your screen, the Democratic primary for governor, you'll see Jocelyn Benson way up ahead at over 50%. And then there's some other names some of these names you probably haven't heard of, but maybe you've heard of Sheriff Chris Swanson, who's Genesee County Sheriff. Still way behind. Jocelyn Benson has a lot more resources and has consistently been ahead in the polls. So once you hit over 50% like that, there's just a center of gravity that starts coming into play. Now let's take a look at the primary for Senate. So United States Senate, you'll remember that Gary Peters is retiring. So Senator Peters will be out, and this is the race to replace Senator Peters. So on the left-hand side of the screen here, you'll see the Democratic primary, which is where all the action is. So it's kind of the flip of the Republican primary, and for governor, the Republican primary is the one with all the action, and on the Democratic side is pretty much settled. It's the opposite here. So this was kind of a surprise to me to see Haley Stevens in third place. So member of Congress from Oakland County, Haley Stevens at 13.4%. That was a big surprise to me. I would have expected that these top three candidates would have been about neck and neck. Mallory McMorrow, a state senator, is at just under 24, and Abdul El Sayed, who actually ran for governor back in 2018 in the primary against Gretchen Whitmer, at 24%. So that's definitely a three-way race there. That is, there's no way anybody could look at this race and say, hey, somebody's got this in the bag. That one is very much open. Now look at the Republican primary. So most of these names probably won't look very familiar to you, but Mike Rogers, who's a former member of Congress from Brighton, is in, and at over 55%. He's going to win this primary. So this is I think it's an interesting case here where the one party has kind of like settled things early in the governor's race, and the opposite party has settled things early on the Senate race. And and it's going to be a really interesting election season. So this was the first time that I'd seen a primary poll that is published in a while, at least, especially one that had like serious crosstabs and sample sizes for each primary. Sometimes they would do a general election and then kind of do some crosstabs to get an inference um, about the primary, but those are have high margin of error. Emerson College is a serious national pollster, and that's a pretty good indication. I think it should be treated as a serious indication on where those races are.
All right, a couple of follow-up questions here, Brian. So it looks like Benson has a big lead, but is Swanson pushing forward at all?
Yeah, here's the thing about Sheriff Swanson is he is a bundle of energy, and he really does believe that he's got a shot, and he's behaving like he's got a shot in every way. So there is no give up in Chris Swanson. He did turn in his signatures, and that's a big hurdle to be able to turn in. You have to get between no less than 15,000, but you can't turn any more than 30,000 in. And and he turned in 26,000 signatures. And if those were all volunteer led, which I believe they were, then those tend to have a high degree of validity to them. So he probably will make the ballot. He was able to turn those signatures in. The other thing I made a note here of was that he got an endorsement and of a union, IBEW, that is that's it's not like the UAW, the MEA or something, but like it's still a serious like it is a pretty big deal to get a union endorsement in a Democratic race. And so even though the polls make it look like it's over, he he says he's in it for the long haul, and I believe him. He's that he's going to see this thing through.
All right, let's talk more a little bit about the US Senate primary. You showed us who's leading in that Emerson poll, but let's talk about the money race. What did the federal campaign finance filings show?
Yeah, this was pretty interesting too. Remember that this is the one where the Democrats have a three-way race basically, and the Republicans have basically settled it with Mike Rogers early. So let's start with Mike Rogers first. Um, Mike Rogers, he raised 2.24 million in the first quarter, and that comes on the heel of 1.97 million. So he's back to back $2 million filings, and he's running a pretty efficient campaign in that because he doesn't have serious primary opposition, he's able to save more of that money. He has what was it, 4.21 million cash on hand. Over the entire cycle, and he's been in the race for a long time. He's had an organization in place for a while, 7.74 million total that is raised. So he's able to raise money and bank more of the money. Among the Democrats, where they are actively campaigning and are going to have to win a primary race, Mallory McMorrow, State Senator Mallory McMorrow, was the top fundraiser in this quarter. And this was again a little bit of a surprise to me too. Now, Haley Stevens had been the top fundraiser before, and sometimes if earlier success means because there's limits on how much you can raise from any individual, sometimes that means that fundraising gets harder as you go. But she raised over $3 million, $3.03 million in the first quarter, and she had 3.69 million cash on hand, and she's raised 8.62 million over the cycle. So those are big numbers. The Abdul Al Sayed from Ann Arbor he raised 2.3 million. And so I can't stress how unusual it is to have multiple candidates raising millions of dollars per quarter. Okay, this is really something. Abdul Al Sayed had raised $2.3 million. He had 2.53 million cash on hand, and over the entire cycle has raised $7.65 million. And then Haley Stevens, member of Congress, of all the candidates over the life of the race, she's raised the most, 8.87 million. But raised the least of these candidates in this quarter, which was 2.03, but that's pretty close. So, right, the three candidates over two, actually all four of these candidates I talked about, you throw in Mike Rogers on the Republican side, over $2 million. So they are all in hyperdrive where their poll numbers are all make them legit. They're obviously doing the money to doing the work to raise the money, and they're pushing forward. It's a this is one of the more active and competitive Senate races that I've seen really my whole time watching.
Is Mike Rogers getting a big boost from the national level?
Yeah, this was kind of this. It's almost like it got buried. I thought it was a really big story, and it was for like a day, but then it seemed to have kind of fallen out because just a minute ago I'm talking about these candidates raising $2 million and $3 million. So the Senate Leadership Fund, which is the like the central committee in DC that helps candidates get elected around the country, they made the largest ever advertising reservation in their target races nationwide, but 45 million of it was for Michigan for Mike Rogers. And so they give you a sense for this is a serious push that is being made here. So you have really three really strong candidates. So and among the Democrats, which is a sign that they really believe they can win the race. And then you've got a strong candidate on the Republican side that's kind of wrapped it up, but also this push from outside. You don't get those sorts of dollars unless they think they can also win it. So what that means is that the control of the Senate, and the control of the Senate really is on the line here of the United States Senate, that one of the ground zero states. There'll just be a handful, four or five states that will decide everything. One of them is Michigan.
All right, let's take a look at today's Data Monday report.
All right, now I've got several things I'm going to run through, and I'm going to go through fairly quickly. So please forgive that because there's just a bunch. We haven't had a Data Monday in a little while because I was off doing other things the last couple of weeks, and thanks to Jacob for filling in. First is I'm going to start with the good news, and it's hard to good news economically is a little bit harder to come by these days, but the jobs report did come out better than expected. So it was, as you look at these monthly jobs reports numbers, there's been a lot of downward revisions, and then last month's number was a big negative number, but up this month, and surprisingly so. And so a big swing. Now these surveys seem to get corrected months out, so maybe that number will be revised downward in the future. But of all of the things that we're looking at here, this was the one that was probably the most positive. Well, not probably, definitely the most positive of everything I'm going to show you here today. All right. The next thing is labor force participation. And looking at the national labor force numbers, you've got the overall between men and women at of the entire workforce, including men and women, at 61.9%. You can see how that's going down. And it's both among men and women that is going down. So labor force participation rate of women at 57.1%, and men at 67%. So not good. This is one that I get pretty concerned when I see this labor force participation going down like that. Now we're going to look at a series of surveys that from the National Federation of Independent Business. And these aren't just Michigan businesses, these are national. And so we see, we're going to start with optimism and outlook, and they're both down. So they had recovered pretty nicely. And there was some optimism coming into the year. And that optimism has definitely taken a hit. It's not as low as it had fallen in those immediate years previous to the pandemic, but it's the trend doesn't look good at all. And so when there's not optimism, that means there's not hiring. Um, and then and so when and it just has a way of kind of cascading from there. The single most important problem. So we look at this one at least 3 or 4 times a year. We'll look at the survey, and they always have the top four on here, and it gets really messy here at the end. They've traded places. They're moving. Things are moving. So concern about taxes going up and concern about inflation going up. Concern it had come inflation had come down. Now that's gone up more. And then but then quality of labor way down in the survey too, which was a little bit surprised because that one had been on the rise. The actual earnings. So this is a negative 25%. So small businesses saying that their earnings are down. This is obviously going to play into the next couple of slides where we look at small businesses saying it's the uncertainty index, but again, it's not, the bottom hasn't fallen out, but you can see the downward trend where uncertainty is creeping in and it's hard to move forward when you're uncertain about the future. And then part of that uncertainty, of course, being just the policies around tariffs not settling. Even after there's a Supreme Court case, there's still a lot of things up up in the air. But if you were to look at the domestic price index and the import price index, so separating out whether something's imported or something is made domestically, both on the rise. And that's not a surprise to people because people are experiencing cost increases, but this just kind of looking at where that trend turned around. So you see what the trend line did look like before, clearly different. Now, the consumer price index, we look at this in a couple of different ways. So there's the top line or the headline number, and then you take out the commodities of food and energy, things like gasoline, for example, where the price goes up and down a lot. So if you look at the headline number, you'll see it's 3.3%. And that's the one that jumped up. That jumped up because of commodities like fuel tied to the war in Iran. The 2.6% though being the core. So you take out those commodities and say, okay, but what about the other stuff? And the other stuff still looks pretty stable. So and in terms of again, this is the consumer price index. So the that tells me that the Federal Reserve is probably not going to change their position of just leaving things the same. Some people have said, "Oh, inflation went up. They're gonna maybe start increasing interest rates to try to tame inflation." I don't think that they'll do that if the core inflation isn't going up much. I think as long as core inflation stays low, they will continue the wait and see approach. Not surprisingly, looking at year over year changes, fuel oil and gasoline being at the top. And then, of course, you see airline prices up too, and that's highly tied to fuel costs. The producer price index is another way of looking at this. So the cost of production, consumers price index is what consumers are feeling. But then the producer price index is basically the input cost. And this can be a foreshadow of what is to come on the consumer side. And you see both of those kind of generally trending upward as well. And there's been upward pressure here that actually goes back earlier than if you look at the trend line, you very clearly see that this started rising in 2023, not just 2024, but it hasn't stopped. And so lots of concerns with respect to cost increases. I wanted to share with you what the consumer sentiment. So we look at the sentiment, we look at the expectations, we look at their perception of current economic conditions. The University of Michigan are the ones who run this survey, and they have for many, many decades. And you can see what's happening to consumer sentiment is down. It continues to go down. The question is what really is the bottom of it. And now this is kind of just an odd one to throw in at the end. I love these Arbor data science graphs, and they just share interesting insights, things you might not think of it. And so if you've got an 18 to 34-year-old child, one of your children who's an adult living with you, well, you've got plenty of company. You see in Michigan, 32.5% of adults in that age range are living with their parents. And so I just thought that was an interesting one to share there as we close out Data Monday. So much to look at. I was surprised to see jobs kind of make a comeback, but cost increases, not surprisingly, some big risks there.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing that, Brian. And thanks everyone for tuning in today. We'll see you back here next Monday at 3 o'clock. Have a great
See you
week.
next time.